At the memorial for my famous architect husband, the woman he called his muse approached the podium, looked directly at me, and began her speech with the words, "Arthur and I believe that the best structures are built on truth. His marriage was not one of them." Her voice, clear and steady, cut through the hushed reverence of the gallery. 100 heads turned in unison. A flock of birds startled by a gunshot. They looked at her, then at me, their faces a mixture of shock, pity, and a delicious, morbid curiosity. My daughter Lily's small hand tightened in mine, her knuckles white. My mother, sitting beside me, made a small, strangled sound, a mix of outrage and horror. My whole body felt like it had been turned to stone, a statue in a museum of my own humiliation. But I didn't look away. I held Chloe's gaze, because I knew, and she didn't, that this performance was not the end of the story. It was merely the opening act, and I knew, with a certainty that had settled deep in my bones over the past few days, exactly how it would end. A few moments later, our family lawyer, Mr. Davies, would walk to the front of the room holding a small, polished mahogany box. He would present it to her, a final, posthumous gift from the man she thought she'd won, and when she opened it, she would understand the true nature of the man she claimed to love. Then, and only then, she would scream. Before the memorial, I hadn't cried. Arthur had been dead for a week, the victim of a single-car accident on a winding coastal highway. They said it was fast, that the fog had been thick, but the mechanics of his death felt irrelevant. What was real was the gaping hole he'd left behind. A void not of love, but of presence. The house was quieter, emptier. The morning of the service, I moved through the motions like a ghost in my own life. I remember the bitter taste of coffee I forced myself to drink, the scent of the lilies I'd ordered for the gallery, a flower he despised because he found them funereal. The irony was not lost on me. Lily, my 9-year-old daughter, zipped up her simple black dress, her face a careful mask of grown-up solemnity. She was trying so hard to be brave, to not understand that the foundation of her world had been dynamited. "You look powerful, my dear," my mother said, her voice a fierce whisper as she helped me fasten the clasp of my necklace. Her hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly. "Don't let them see you falter." Not for a second. I had chosen my outfit with the precision of a general dressing for battle. Not a widow's black, but a tailored, charcoal gray suit with sharp shoulders. It was the suit I wore when I closed my first major business deal. A suit he'd once said made me look intimidating. "It's not very soft, Elena," he'd remarked. "A woman in your position should aim for approachable." Today, I didn't want to be approachable. I wanted to be a fortress. I looked at my reflection and saw a stranger with my face hair pulled back in a severe, élégant note. Makeup a careful spackle over the sleepless nights. I wore the dark red lipstick he'd always hated. The one he said was too much. It felt like war paint. The memorial was held at a downtown art gallery, a cavernous space with stark white walls and polished concrete floors. It was the site of his latest retrospective, Arthur Vance, Structures of an Unseen World. His architectural models were displayed on pedestals like ancient relics, each one a monument to his genius and his ego. The room was packed. Colleagues, clients, critics, city officials, all the people who had orbited the bright, burning star of Arthur Vance. I saw a city councilman who had once praised Arthur's unwavering integrity. I saw a wealthy client whose wife had tearfully admired our perfect marriage at a gala last year. They were all here to mourn a man they didn't know. A carefully constructed facade. Lily clutched my hand as we made our way to the seats reserved at the front. I could feel her trembling. She hadn't asked many questions. Just one. The night I told her, "Did Daddy love us?" It was the only question that mattered, and the one I couldn't fully answer. As we sat, I scanned the room, and then I saw her, Chloe. She wasn't hiding in the back. She was near the front, moving through the crowd with a proprietary air, accepting condolences, as if she were the bereaved. She was wearing a dress, the color of blood, a slash of defiant crimson in a sea of muted tones. She was young, beautiful, and radiated an ambition so sharp you could cut yourself on it. I didn't need anyone to identify her. I had known about her for years. I'd found the evidence tucked away in the predictable places, credit card statements with charges for hotels I'd never seen, a stray earring in the passenger seat of his car, a book of poetry on his nightstand with an inscription that wasn't from me. But the real confirmation had been a sketch I'd found in his study one night when he was working late. It was a preliminary design for his most famous building, the Horizon Tower, a structure celebrated for its seemingly impossible grace. And in the corner, almost hidden in the sweeping lines of the structure, were her initials. C. H. Intertwined with his. He hadn't just been sleeping with her, he had been building with her, weaving her into the very fabric of his legacy. That was the deeper betrayal. I had chosen not to confront him. A part of me was afraid, another part too tired. I told myself I was staying for Lily, preserving the fragile peace of our home. But the truth was, I had stayed because I didn't know how to leave the beautiful Pricening's R1, hollow structure he had built around me. Chloe's eyes met mine across the room. There was no shame in them. No flicker of apology. There was only a cool, challenging entitlement. She believed she belonged here more than I did. I felt Lee shift beside me. Sensing the sudden tension, I squeezed her hand and whispered, "Just focus on the pretty buildings Daddy made." "Okay," she nodded, her small face full of a trust I felt I didn't deserve. The director of the gallery began to speak, his voice droning on about Arthur's vision and contributions to the city's skyline. I stared at the large photograph of my husband projected on the wall behind him. He was smiling that easy, charismatic smile that had charmed critics and broken my heart. I tried to remember the man in the picture, the one I had fallen in love with, but all I could feel was the cold, hard architecture of his lies, a structure he had built around us, trapping us all inside. The gallery director was in the middle of a particularly dry anecdote about Arthur's early struggles when a single, sharp sound cut through his monologue, the confident click of a high heel on the polished concrete floor. It was Chloe. She had risen from her seat and was walking toward the podium. Not with hesitation, but with the unshakable purpose of someone who believes the stage has been waiting for them. The director faltered, his words trailing off into a confused silence. He looked at her, then at me, as if seeking permission. I gave him none. I remained perfectly still, a marble effigy of a wife. My hand, a warm, protective cage around Lily's. Chloe reached the podium and placed her hands on either side of it, leaning in as if sharing an intimate secret with the entire room. She offered a small, sad smile to the bewildered director. "Thank you," she said, her voice smooth as silk, dismissing him with two simple words. He retreated from the stage, flustered and irrelevant. "I know this is not on the program," Chloe began, her gaze sweeping across the assembled crowd of mourners, "but I couldn't let this day pass without speaking about the real Arthur. The man I knew, the artist." She placed a hand over her heart, a gesture of practiced sincerity. "Some of you may have known him as a husband, a father, a colleague. I knew him as a collaborator, a confidant, a kindred spirit. What we shared was a synergy that went beyond the physical. It was a meeting of minds, a connection so profound that it became the invisible blueprint for his greatest works." People shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I could hear a low murmur ripple through the room. My mother's hand found my arm, her grip a desperate, angry vice. "Elena, you must stop this," she hissed. "No," I whispered back, my eyes never leaving Chloe. "Let her build her monument. I want to see how tall it gets before it collapses. I wanted to hear the full architecture of her fantasy. Every last lie she had told herself. Chloe's voice took on a theatrical tremor. He would come to me. Exhausted. Drained by a life that didn't understand the demands of his genius. He felt stiff-legged, trapped in a world of domestic obligation that was suffocating his soul. She paused, letting the implication hang in the air. Thick and poisonous. We would talk for hours. About art. About life. About the desperate need for authenticity. He used to say our time together was the only time he could truly breathe. I felt Lily press closer against my side. Her small body tense. She didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. She knew this woman, this beautiful stranger in the red dress, was saying something terrible about our family. I began to rub small, soothing circles on her back, my only outward sign of the inferno raging inside me. My blood felt like ice in my veins. I focused on the cold, hard lines of the architectural model to my right, a tower of steel and glass, and imagined it shattering. Then, Chloe turned. She shifted her body so she was no longer addressing the crowd. But speaking directly to me, her expression was no longer one of grief, but of a strange, chilling pity. The kind a victor bestows upon the vanquished. He told me everything. "Elena," she said, her voice dropping to a more intimate, conspiratorial level, forcing the crowd to lean in to hear. He told me how lonely he was, how he only stayed for Lily, because he couldn't bear to break her heart. She took a breath, delivering the final, killing blow. He wanted you to know that he respected you as the mother of his child, but he never loved you, not in the way he loved me. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum, sucking all the air and warmth from the room. 100 pairs of eyes were on me, dissecting my composure, waiting for the crack in the facade. They were waiting for the tears, the outburst, the scream. I gave them nothing. I simply sat there, my spine straight, my gaze level, and I let her masterpiece of cruelty hang in the air. A testament not to my husband's love for her, but to his capacity for casual destruction. Lily looked up at me, her small face a canvas of confusion and fear. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why is that lady lying?" I squeezed her hand tighter, leaned down, and whispered back, my voice a fierce, protective shield around her. Because sometimes, sad people need to tell stories to feel important. It has nothing to do with us. I didn't know if she understood, but in that moment, she was the only person in the room I was speaking to. I had let Chloe have her performance. Now, it was almost time for the truth. A satisfied, almost serene smile touched Chloe's lips as she basked in the heavy silence. She believed she had won, that she had successfully rewritten the narrative in her favor, cementing her place as the tragic, true love of a misunderstood genius. She looked at me one last time, her eyes conveying a final, dismissive pity. But just as she turned to leave the podium, a calm, authoritative voice cut through the stillness. "Miss Hart, if you would please wait one moment." Every head swiveled toward the source of the voice. It was Mr. Davies, our family lawyer. A man in his late 60s with a face that seemed incapable of expressing any emotion other than tired diligence. He was standing up from his seat in the second row and began walking toward the front of the gallery. He moved without haste, his polished leather shoes making soft, deliberate sounds on the concrete floor. In his hands, he held a small box, crafted from a dark and rich mahogany, so polished it seemed to drink the light. It didn't look like a simple box. It was intricate, with inlaid patterns and a silver clasp, resembling one of Arthur's own architectural models. Chloe froze, her hand halfway to her side. Her expression shifted from triumph to confusion. then to a flicker of avaricious curiosity. Mr. Davy stopped directly in front of her, creating a tableau at the foot of the stage: the grieving widow, the triumphant muse, and the stoic lawyer holding a final secret. Mr. Vance left a number of detailed instructions in a codicil to his will. Mr. Davies said, his voice dry and devoid of any emotion. He was simply an executor, delivering a final, binding message. One of them was very specific. He requested that I present this to you, Chloe Hart. At this public memorial, he insisted it be done in front of everyone. He extended the box to her. For the first time since she had walked into the gallery, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Chloe's face, but it was quickly replaced by a renewed wave of triumphant belief. Of course, this was it. The final validation. The last love letter. The secret he couldn't share in life. Now delivered for all to see. Her victory lap. She took the box from him, her fingers caressing the smooth wood. She held it for a moment, weighing it in her hands, a triumphant smile returning to her lips. She glanced at me, a look so full of smug victory, it was almost comical. She wanted me to watch this. She wanted me to witness her anointment as his true heir. I obliged her. I watched. My face, a perfect, unreadable mask. She unlatched the silver clasp. The lid opened with a soft AT. Expensive click. I leaned forward just slightly. I already knew what was inside. Mr. Davies having shown me the night before in the sterile quiet of his office. But I wanted to see her see it. I wanted to watch the truth land. At first, she just stared, her head tilted. It clearly wasn't what she was expecting. There was no velvet lining. No diamond ring. No tear-stained letter professing undying love. Instead, nestled on a bed of simple black linen, was a small, tangled cluster of old-fashioned keys. They were brass and iron, ornate and varied, like keys to a dozen different secret gardens. She reached in and lifted the cluster. They made a soft, metallic clinking sound. Each key was attached to a simple, white tag. Her brow furrowed in confusion. She examined the tag on the largest key. Written in Arthur's elegant, architectural script was the name, Sarah. She flipped to the next one, Isabel. The next, Maria. Then Kat. And finally, a small, delicate silver key with the name Ava. 5 keys. 5 names. None of them were hers. Her breathing hitched. Her gaze darted from the keys to me, then back to the box. A frantique? Desperate search for an explanation that would make it all make sense again. Her eyes fell on something else lying beneath the keys. It was one of Arthur's business cards, thick and embossed. She snatched it up. The front was pristine, just his name, and firm. She turned it over. On the back, a single sentence was scrawled in his familiar black ink. I had memorized the words, the casual, devastating cruelty of them. You were all my muses, which means none of you were. The color drained from Chloe's face. The lie she had built her entire identity around for years, the fantasy of being the one, the singular inspiration. The secret queen was demolished by a dozen words from a dead man. She wasn't his muse. She was just another project. Another structure he had built for his own gratification, as disposable as the last, a name on a key he hadn't even bothered to have made. She made a sound. A choked, guttural gasp. The business card fluttered from her numb fingers. Her eyes, which had been so full of fire and triumph just moments before, were now wide with a dawning, shattering horror. The box slipped from her other hand, clattering to the floor. The keys spilled out across the polished concrete with a sound like broken promises. Then she screamed. It wasn't a sound of anger or sadness. It was the raw, animal sound of a soul being flayed alive. A shriek of pure, undiluted humiliation. She stumbled backward. Away from the box. Away from the keys. As if they were venomous. She looked at me. Her face a grotesque mask of shock and agony. Her mouth open in a silent, continuing scream. Then she turned and ran. Her confident, poised stride was gone, replaced by a clumsy, desperate scramble. Her high heels scraped and skidded on the floor as she fled down the main aisle. Past the rows of stunned, silent guests. Past the models of the beautiful buildings she thought she had inspired. The heavy glass doors of the gallery slammed shut behind her. The echo reverberating through the vast, silent space, like a final, crashing chord. For a long, stunned moment. The entire gallery was a frozen tableau. The only things moving were the dust motes dancing in the spotlights. The spilled keys lay scattered on the floor like fallen soldiers. Mr. Davies, ever the professional, calmly bent down and began to retrieve them. His expression unreadable. The silence was finally broken not by a word, but by a collective, shuddering exhalation from the crowd, followed by an immediate eruption of hushed, frantic whispers. The memorial had devolved into a scandal, and the guests were feasting on the wreckage. I didn't move. My focus was singular, Lily. I kept my hand on her back. Avorm. Steady anchor in the sea of chaos. Then, the heavy glass doors burst open again. It was Chloe. Her perfect crimson dress was now slightly askew. Her makeup was a disastrous watercolor of tears and mascara. The smug entitlement was gone, replaced by a raw, wild desperation. She wasn't coming back to fight. She was coming back for an answer. A last, desperate attempt to find a foundation in the rubble of her collapsed reality. She stormed back toward me, her movements clumsy and uncoordinated. People in her path shrank away. She stopped a few feet from our seats, her chest heaving. Why, she demanded, her voice a raw, broken thing. After everything, why would he do that to me? I looked at this woman. This girl really, who had built her world on the word of a man who specialized in hollow structures. And for the first time, he felt not anger, but a profound, weary pity. I stood up slowly, ensuring I was a shield between her and my daughter. He didn't do it to you. Chloe, I said, and my voice was calm and clear. A surgeon's scalpel. He did it for himself, because that is who he was. He built beautiful things, and he destroyed them, often in the same breath. It had nothing to do with love. It was just his design. She stared at me, her mind clearly unable to process a truth that didn't revolve around her. She had been a feature in his landscape, not the landscape itself. The realization seemed to break the last of her strength. She let out a dry, ragged sob, turned, and fled for the final time, leaving behind nothing but the ghost of her expensive perfume and the lingering, bitter taste of public humiliation. I took Lily's hand. It's time to go, I whispered. We walked out of that gallery, past the gawking faces and the whispers, past the monuments to my husband's genius, and stepped out into the clean, cool air of the evening. We didn't look back. In the car, after several minutes of silence, Lily finally spoke, her small voice cutting through the quiet hum of the engine. Mommy, she asked, was she one of Daddy's other houses? I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Her brow was furrowed with a child's earnest attempt to make sense of an adult catastrophe. She had seen the keys. She had made a connection. I knew this was a moment that would shape her, and I chose my words with care. Daddy was a brilliant man. Sweetie, I began, my voice soft but steady. He built the most wonderful, magical houses. But his heart was a bit like an unfinished building. It had lots of rooms, and sometimes he got lost in them. He made mistakes, big mistakes that hurt people. But you, I said, meeting her eyes in the mirror. You were never a mistake. His love for you was the one true thing he ever built. That was his masterpiece. Don't you ever forget that? She seemed to understand. She nodded, leaned her head against the window, and was quiet for the rest of the drive home. That night, our house felt different. The silence wasn't the heavy, grief-stricken quiet of the past week. It was a clean, empty space, a blank slate. After I tucked Lily into bed, I walked into Arthur's study. It had been his sanctuary, a pristine world of leather-bound books, custom furniture, and his precious architectural awards gleaming on glass shelves. It felt like a tome. I didn't feel rage. I felt nothing but a profound sense of release. I pulled a stack of empty cardboard boxes from the storage closet, and I didn't smash his awards or tear up his blueprints. My victory wasn't in destruction. It was in reclamation. I carefully wrapped each trophy and placed it in a box. I rolled up the drawings of buildings that had won him fame. I took his expensive, first edition books from the shelves. I was not erasing him. I was containing him. I was packing up the myth of Arthur Vance, the public spectacle, and putting it away so that Elena, the woman who had lived in his shadow for too long, could finally have the room to breathe. As I worked, I thought about that box of keys. I realized then that Arthur's final cruel act hadn't been for Chloe at all. It was for me. It was his confession, delivered in the only way a man like him knew how, through a grand, dramatic, destructive gesture. He couldn't give me an apology. He couldn't give me the truth while he was alive. So he left me this instead. The demolition of all my doubts. All the years I'd spent wondering if I was the reason he was so distant. If I was the one who wasn't enough. It was his final, twisted gift, clarity. And with clarity came freedom. The next morning, I stood by the kitchen window, sipping my coffee. The sun was streaming in. In the backyard, Lily was throwing a ball for our dog. Her laughter bright and clear. The sound filled the house, chasing out the last of the shadows. I was not mourning Arthur anymore. I was mourning the woman I had been when I was with him, the one who made herself smaller to make him feel big, the one who accepted silence as a substitute for love. That woman was gone, buried with him, and the woman standing in her place was just getting started. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever had to find the truth in the wreckage of a lie, or find the strength to tear down an old life to build a new one, please share it. Someone else might be standing in the ruins, needing to know they're not alone. Let me know in the comments what you think. Was Arthur's final act a form of justice? Or just one last act of cruelty? And if you want more real stories about the complex, messy, and ultimately liberating journey of healing, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's coming next. Thanks for listening to my truth. I'll see you in the next chapter.